right, my friends, my Italian food fanatics. Today we're going to make Pollo Alla Cacciatora, chicken cacciatore. Actually, cacciatora is the proper pronunciation, but in America we call it cacciatore. So, here it is. It's a beautiful dish. Now come on, let's get in the kitchen and I'll show you how it's made. Oh, before we go, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, like and subscribe. Hit the bell button too, so that you'll be informed whenever I release a video. So come on, enough time wasted. Let's go learn how to make it. It's phenomenal. You're gonna love it. All right, my fellow Italian food fanatics, first things first. While we're gonna prep the ingredients for the chicken cacciatora, we're going to first season our chicken. We do that. I like to place a barrier down, even though I'm going to use this plate. I have a couple of chicken thighs here today. I'm going to put those down, and we're going to take this and wash it really, really well. In the meantime, we're going to take some salt, and from high above, we are going to salt these thighs. Now, the reason why I like to use thighs as opposed to chicken breast is because the thighs, they can cook for an extended period of time. This is basically a braise, and they're still going to remain juicy and moist, as opposed to the breast meat, which has to be cooked very, very quickly, and it's not cacciatora, okay? So that's that. Now, we want to be very, very careful here with cross-contamination. You notice that I have one hand that put the chicken on here, and the other hand, it's clean, it's not contaminated. And that's also the reason why we want to put a barrier down. We want to make sure that none of the raw chicken gets on the cutting board or anywhere near where we're going to do prep, even though that stuff's going to be cooked. Okay, you don't want any of your guests or family to be sick. You don't need to use bleach, you don't need to use anything. Hot water and soap will do it to clean everything up. More importantly, only about 50% of the chicken in America has salmonella, but we must always assume that every single piece that we touch has it. When they mix chicken that has salmonella with chicken that doesn't have salmonella, it transfers across. So we want to be very careful with cross-contamination, and we also want to be very, very careful with cleaning everything too. You don't want to leave stuff that's touched chicken on the counter, and you have to think about what you're going to do. All right, so with that in mind, let's move forward. Okay, my fellow Italian food fanatics, let's talk about what's going to go into the pollo alla cacciatora. First of all, we're going to use some olive oil. Since I'm from Southern California, we're going to use 100% California olive oil in there. We're going to use some garlic. These are smaller cloves, so instead of using one, we're going to use a couple. All right, you can use as much or as little as you want. We're also going to use what's known as mirepoix, or soffritto in Italian, carrots, onions, and celery. We're also going to use some fresh tomatoes. We're going to use some rosemary, some thyme, and some bay leaf. There's the rosemary, there's the thyme, and we have a couple of bay leaves going on here. We're also going to use a fresh red chili, half of one actually. We have some white wine. We have some chicken stock. We have some parsley that we're going to use. And some tomato paste in the tube, which is the only way to buy it, by the way. That way you don't waste the tomato paste. And we have some olives, and we have some capers, and of course we have our chicken. And now we're going to prep everything. Oh, and also one last thing. mushrooms. You have to have mushrooms in cacciatora. Cacciatora is a hunter's style. What do you find when you're out hunting? Including herbs and spices and things like that, you're going to find mushrooms. And typically in Italy, this dish is made with rabbit as opposed to chicken. But since rabbit is really not part of our diet in North America, we're going to stick with the chicken. And of course, it's easy to find these days. So let's clean this up and we'll be back to prep everything. Let's start with the onion. A trick that I learned from the great Thomas Keller is to peel your onions on top of some liner paper. That way, it's not a mess on your cutting board. So you cut your onion and peel it, and then when you're done, all you have to do is, let me get done first. All you have to do is wrap this up, and it's gone. And now you have a clean cutting surface instead of all of the paper and the skin from the onion. Now, of course, in this case, I'm going to toss this, but typically in the kitchen, you would want to use the onion for stock. You don't want to waste anything. But in this case, it's so little that it really makes no difference for us today. Now, we're not going to use the entire onion here, but I will show you my way of dicing onion. Now, the thing about it is that this particular recipe doesn't require us to use very, very small cuts. Since it's essentially going to be a braise, it's a lot easier if we just did a rough chop like this of the onion. All right? Watch your hands when you do this. It should be up onto the knuckle, and your fingers should be curled back this way so that they never hit anything but the knuckles, but you can still have control over the item that you are cutting. All right? Just remember, it's going to take a little bit of practice to be able to hold whatever you're holding. Hold your thumb behind your index finger like this, and then you can cut, and you'll know that you will never cut your fingers off. All right, it will eventually happen. You will cut yourself if you work in the kitchen for any period of time, as we all know. But this is a way to minimize any potential trouble. So now let's prep our celery. Take a rib of celery. We're going to use that part for stock, and I think we're only going to use a portion of this, but it bears showing you anyway. Cut down the end like this. Put down the length of the celery, and then see, notice how my index finger's behind, or pardon me, my thumb's behind my index finger. That's the way to do it. And then you can just cut down, and your hand slowly moves backwards this way. Oops. Okay, done. And there's your celery. Let's put that off to the side. And then, of course, we're going to have our carrot too. These are heirloom carrots that I buy. They're organic, and so that's why it's kind of yellow. I have orange, I have yellow, I have purple, and I thought that this would be a kind of a cool thing to use in here today. So we just peel it, and this is a regular peeler. I don't like using the other peelers, these newfangled larger peelers. To me, they're worthless. Okay, they're just too cumbersome. If you have a sharp regular peeler, that's going to work for you just fine. And also, these trimmings can be used in stock as well. So, cut the carrot. You have to be careful here because you'll find a flat spot, and if your knife is sharp enough, you can just go right through the carrot like that. Now, this is a wider portion of the carrot than this. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut right about here, and then these we can use the way they are. You can see that they're about the size of the celery. Okay, and then these we're going to cut into 2 portions this way, and or 2 cuts to create 3 portions, 3 pieces. And we can ensure that these pieces are about the same size so that they will cook at the same rate. Cacciatora, in my opinion, would not be cacciatora without mushrooms. We want to use the whole, as much as the mushroom as possible. I've already washed these mushrooms. Now, they say that you shouldn't wash mushrooms, but that is a fallacy, okay? Mushrooms are mostly water. And so what's the problem with washing them? In fact, the great chef, the 3 Michelin star chef, Heston Blumenthal, talks about being able to wash mushrooms. So when it comes to the kitchen, what you need to do is follow what he says, and that is question everything. The great Escoffier was completely wrong when he talked about searing meat to seal in the juices. Searing meat to seal in the juices does not work. The same thing, you don't have to worry about washing the mushrooms. And these are baby portobello mushrooms, and because they're baby portobello mushrooms, we don't really have to worry about taking the gills out from inside. It's not as mature, and so consequently, they're not going to have that earthy or that dirt flavor that you're going to get from the large ones that you have to clean that out from. And we're going to cut these pretty wide, okay? We want to do that because they are full of water and they're going to shrink down. And you'll see as we cook them, in fact, we're going to cook these first and then take them off. We're going to cook them after we brown the chicken. You will see how quickly they reduce down in size by virtue of the fact that they are mostly water. And there's that. Back with more in a minute. All right, now we're going to move on to our tomatoes. I'm going to take these tomatoes and basically quarter them. It's important that you realize, number one, when you cut a tomato, cut it this, if you're going to quarter it, cut it from the open side. Don't put it down and cut it this way. Although it's possible, it's easier for the knife to slip off of that. In particular, if, like most people, you don't have an extremely sharp knife. All right? So this is what you want to do to avoid, again, getting cut. We don't want that. Especially treacherous for somebody that does this for a living, because when you do this for a living, you have to go a lot faster than what we're going here, believe it or not. There's always too much to do and not enough time. But you don't have to worry about that. Take your time, do it the right way, don't hurt yourself. Back in a minute. Now we're going to take this red pepper and we're going to take a little bit of the ribs and the seeds out, because seeds don't really look good. But we're going to leave these ribs in. There's one other seed in there. I'm going to get that out of there. But I do this to give the dish a little bit of heat. And I like the heat. And I like the freshness of these peppers that we can get, excuse me, year-round in California. We don't necessarily need to chop this very, very fine. However, that is going to be good. Oh, we have one lone mullet left. Done. Perfect. Back in a minute. We're also going to use some parsley. We're not going to use the stems. We're just going to use the leaves. You can actually save the stems and use them in stock as well, because that's part of the aromatics that you typically use in literally every stock. In fact, I don't know of a stock that does not use parsley as part of the aromatics, the aromatic package that you put in there, the sachet, as it were. So I'm not going to bore you with doing this. We're just going to take these and we're going to really finely chop these leaves. Of course, they've already been washed. Okay, so we may just fast forward through this whole process for you. And we don't want to use these types of leaves. We want to use the as green as possible. So there we go. Wrap them in a tight package like that. And give them a nice chop. The smaller the parsley is chopped, or the finer the parsley is chopped, the more elegant, in my opinion, it looks. And it doesn't really take a lot of effort to do this. Go against one way, and then the other way. Clean the knife. Go again one way, and then the other way. And clean the knife. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to give it one more run through. And you can see that that's a very fine chop. Could be finer, but that's going to be good for our purposes. And we have a couple more items before we can get started here. We have some olives that we're going to just slice in half. You have to be careful here too. Sometimes these olives are very slippery, especially if they're in olive oil, and you could cut yourself. These are already pitted, but you better make sure that the olives don't contain any pits, because sometimes even the pitted olives have pits inside. They're done by a machine, and the machines are not infallible. Also, we're going to take some capers, and we're going to give the capers a rough chop. They don't need to be fine, although believe it or not, I do like capers in their whole. I'd rather have capers whole than chopped. And we're also, because of these olives and capers and the fact that we already seasoned the chicken a little bit, we essentially are not going to add any more salt into the dish. The dish will already have enough salt. Now, I don't typically like having olives, believe it or not, heated up. But in this case, the olives add, and the capers, of course, add a lot to the dish. And it makes it absolutely delicious. So there you go. We're almost ready to start. I just need to squeeze out about a tablespoon of that tomato paste. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the tomato paste in. In fact, we'll do it right now. I'm going to mix the tomato paste in. That's about 1 tablespoon worth. I'm going to mix that in with the chicken stock. And we're going to leave this garlic here whole. So we'll take a spoon and mix the chicken stock with the tomato paste and use these garlic cloves whole. Get rid of the paper. In fact, we'll do that right now. There we go. That's going to add a nice tomato flavor to everything. All right, let's go to the stove. All right, let's get started. First, we're going to put a little flame underneath the skillet, and we're going to fill it with 100% California olive oil. Now, in this case, I'm being very generous with the olive oil. And you want to be generous with it, because what we're going to do is we're going to fry the chicken, or brown it off, in a little bit more than you would think oil is needed to do that. And the reason that we're going to do that is because the chicken tends to brown more evenly and also absorbs less of the oil in the long run if you brown it this way. With very little bit of oil, the chicken or anything that you're browning seems to absorb more of the oil. And this is especially true if the temperature is not properly, it's not at a high temperature, about 350 to 385. All right, so that's what you need to do. Now we're going to add in our chicken,
and the pan has come up to temperature. It's shimmering almost at the smoking point, and you want to add the chicken in skin down. Now I've had to do the voiceover for this because the sound of the chicken hitting the hot oil and the fact that I had to turn on the vent makes my voice get drowned out. And you want to just leave the chicken in there. You don't want to move it. It'll stick for a second, but then if you leave it alone, it will eventually release itself. So leave it in there. You can see it's a lot of fat, but you don't worry about that.
As you can see, slowly getting.
You can see with a little bit of a time lapse that we're starting to get a little bit of golden color on the skin side of the chicken. You see that? Now, when it comes here, I've moved them around a little bit, and they've been frying and browning for quite some time. And you can see the beautiful golden brown that we're getting there. Now, there's a reason why we want to do this first. When you brown the chicken, it forms new flavor compounds that we find as human beings extremely delicious and appetizing, as opposed to not browning it and leaving it white, and those flavor compounds never develop. So what we're doing is we're building up layers of flavor here, and consequently, when we're going to brown these, we're going to take them out, and then we're going to drain the oil, then put the mushrooms in, and using the fond that's still in the pan, which is flavor, we're going to build on that flavor, and we're also going to reuse some of the oil that is the chicken is cooking in right now to fry the mushrooms in just a moment. Okay, now the other side of the chicken is browned enough. We're going to set them aside and go on to the mushrooms in just about 2 seconds. Back with the shrooms. Okay, what I did was I turned the heat off and I took out all of the oil, and now we're going to just pour the mushrooms in there. And there's still a residual amount of heat inside of the skillet. It's going to begin cooking the mushrooms. Of course, we're going to turn the heat on as well. And the mushrooms are full of water. So what we want to do is we want to basically wait while the mushrooms release their water. And I'm taking some salt and I'm lightly salting the mushrooms. What this does is it helps draw out the moisture, and it helps them release their water. Their water will go into the pan and it will evaporate, and it will concentrate the flavors of the mushrooms while at the same time browning them. And you can see that I'm pouring back a little bit of oil into the mushrooms from the original pan oil that we fried the chicken in. This, of course, keeps the flavor there, but it also helps to speed up the process here. And we're sauteing the mushrooms to brown them, again, to develop flavor, and also to help them release the water like we just discussed. You can see as we go further along and saute the mushrooms that they are getting a little bit of color on them, and they have basically given up most of their water. We're going to continue to cook them a little bit until they're nice and brown, and then we'll go on with the mirepoix, or the sofrito, as it were. And here we are in the final stages of the mushrooms, and we're going to get them out of here in just a second and starting with the sofrito. But it bears mentioning that some people like to use porcini mushrooms in this particular dish. But I'm here to tell you is that porcini mushrooms, no matter how delicious they unfortunately are so strong, especially the dried ones when you reconstitute them, the real Italian ones, not the ones from China, that they, in my opinion, tend to overpower the dish. That's why I like to use baby portobello mushrooms. They have a very, very good flavor, but they're not going to take over. But you have to have mushrooms in cacciatora.
All right, we're back. The mushrooms have been taken out. Now we're going to add a couple of tablespoons of this oil back into our pan. And we're going to add our sofrito in there. Temperature's a little bit high, so we go a little bit lower with it. We'll also add in our garlic. And we want to cook this until the onions are translucent. We can also now add our aromatics. Some thyme, some bay leaves, some rosemary, add another bay leaf in there. And believe it or not, the perfume that comes off of that, it's pretty incredible. Especially with those aromatics in there. And we'll come back when these have softened enough and it's time for us to remove the garlic. Now that these are sizzling along, we can add in our hot pepper. Now I particularly like a lot of pepper, and so even though this is not going to be that hot, that's still going to give us a nice amount of heat. But more importantly, between the heirloom carrots and the green celery and the onions and the red peppers. Look how beautiful that color is. I mean, isn't that gorgeous? How sweet it is. Look what nature gives us. It gives us such wonderful flavors and colors. It's what makes cooking so much fun. It makes eating even better. We'll come back in a minute. Okay, now that our sofrito has cooked sufficiently, we'll now remove these two pieces of garlic. They've done their job. We don't want it to be, it's not garlic chicken. It is cacciatora. Then we're going to add our chicken back in, like this, along with the mushrooms. And all of the juices. Don't worry, I'll get those pieces of garlic out of there right now. That's one, and that's two. Let's distribute these evenly in the pan. I mean, how sweet it is. Look at that. That's a beautiful cacciatora. But now that we have that, we're going to add our white wine. And we're going to allow that to reduce. I'll turn up the heat a little bit and allow it to reduce down. And we'll be back. And as you can see, the cacciatora has come up to temperature and we're now reducing the wine. As you can see, the wine has reduced down. Still a little bit left. That's okay. We're going to let it reduce just for another minute or so, and we'll come back. And so now that it's reduced, we're going to go in with our tomatoes. Our olives. And of course our capers too. And finally, that chicken stock with the tomato paste. Give it a little bit of a shake. I'm going to bring it to temperature, and then we're going to cover it and let it simmer. Now that the skillet is at a simmer, I'm going to turn the heat down. To about a medium low, and we'll give it a cover up like this. And we're going to let it bubble away for about 15 minutes. We'll check it, and if we need to add more liquid, for example, if the chicken stock reduces down to nothing, highly unlikely because we have tomatoes in there and stuff like that, then we're going to add a little bit of water or more chicken stock, but that won't happen, I don't think. So here we go. Be back in about 15 minutes to check on the dish. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes, and you can see how the chicken is bubbling away. And now what we're going to do is, a lot of people would say, turn the chicken over, but I want to leave that. You see how beautiful that skin is? That's going to be the presentation side. So we're going to leave that the way that it is, but what we are going to do is leave this ajar a little bit so that it reduces down, because when condensation goes, when it's covered, it's not going to reduce as much. So we'll reduce this down and check it in about 15 minutes. You can also see what I've done here. Sometimes we need it to reduce, but it's difficult to put the top on in a way that it doesn't touch the food. So I just lay a wooden spoon on the skillet so that the top can stay ajar that way. There you go. Something for you to lock up in your knowledge. Okay, we're back. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to gently take this chicken out of the sauce. Because the chicken is fully cooked. And now all we have to do is reduce down this sauce just a little bit. And we'll be ready to plate up. How sweet it is. In the meantime, we're also going to remove the bay leaves. You certainly do not want to bite into one of those. That's not exactly a fun item to bite into. But look how beautiful the colors are. The mushrooms, that yellow carrot, it's just perfect. Look how beautiful this is. I hope that you make this for yourself, and I hope that you do try to potentially make it with heirloom varieties, for example, of tomatoes and also of carrots and anything else that you can find that would add an interest to it to make it look more as if it's a country dish, which is what this essentially is. It's a hunter's style. All right, we're ready to plate up. I reduced the sauce down a little bit more, and we found the other bay leaf. And so I'm going to put a little bit of this sauce down, just like this. Now, normally I would put the sauce over the chicken, but I want you to see how beautifully the chicken came out. I mean, that is a beautiful chicken cacciatore. Cacciatora, sorry. And we're just going to add some chopped parsley to the dish like this. And oh boy, it's time to go to town. All right, here we are. It's time to taste it. Chicken cacciatore, or Pollo Alla Cacciatora. It's a braised chicken dish, and it's essentially in the hunter style. Cacciatora means in the style of the hunter. So it's meant to be a rustic sort of a dish. It always, at least in my opinion, I've never seen any legitimate version done without mushrooms. And we're not going to use the breast of chicken. We're going to actually use the thigh meat, as you well know, because it's hard to overcook it and it remains juicy and tender. In Italy, this is a dish typically served with rabbit rather than chicken, and you can't really overcook the rabbit either. You have to actually cook it for a long time so that it is tender, because a rabbit is far more gamey and it uses its limbs more than, say, a chicken does, especially these days with chickens the way they're raised. So it's a rustic style. It has larger pieces in it. It's not a fine dining item, although I'll tell you what, I tasted it and I didn't even have to adjust the seasoning. That's how good it was. Here we go. No, I'm not a fan of olives when they're cooked, but let me tell you, these olives when they're cooked, they taste absolutely delicious. And the thing about it is that between a little bit of salt that we put on the mushrooms, a little bit of salt that we use to season the chicken, and the capers and the olives, believe it or not, this dish is perfectly seasoned. All the elements are there. The sofrito or the mirepoix, you can taste and see that produce that we put in there with the mushrooms and the tomato sauce mixed in there with the white wine. Not the tomato sauce, but rather the tomatoes and the tomato paste. I'm telling you, you really need to go and make this dish. Oh, jeez, that's good. Especially those, I love mushrooms. And of course, again, like I said, this is a dish that definitely has to have mushrooms. You can make it. It's not rocket science. And you can be successful on your very first attempt. So come on. Make this, then go to a restaurant that serves chicken cacciatore, all right? And you'll realize why you never really want to go out and eat at these restaurants. You can make it better than 99% of all the restaurants you're ever going to have this in. Better quality products, clean. Sure, you don't have the ambiance of the restaurant, and yes, you have to do it yourself, but there's a sense of accomplishment in there too. How many people these days know how to cook? It's becoming less and less. We're losing that ability. That's so good. Today, it's a treat to stay in and eat. Back when I was a kid, it was a treat to go out. Today, everybody goes out. You're eating fast food, and it's not good for you, and you wonder why people have diabetes and other ailments, things like that, at such young ages, is because you're eating food that's full of sugar, that's really not good for you. if you would make time and stay home and eat wholesome food like this, you'd be far better off. So, come on. Go get the necessary ingredients it's going to take. Take your time. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time, but I know that you can make it. I know that you'll do a great job. Watch the video a few times. Take some notes. All right? And by the way, all the amounts are on my website, gsargenti.com. Leave a comment below. Oh, God. This is so good. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Okay? Whether you liked it or not, or it doesn't matter. I'd like to hear your feedback. And give me some ideas of what other dishes you'd like me to make for you. Now, come on. Stop messing around. Get in the kitchen. Come on. Go make it. You're going to do great. Thank you. Thanks for your support. Like, subscribe. All right? See you soon. Bye.